All right, now an update on a story we talked about at length on yesterday's show. Incoming Republican Congressman Alan West of Florida had previously announced that conservative and controversial talk show host Joyce Kaufman would be his new chief of staff in Washington. Well, this afternoon, he did an about-face, some would call it a flip-flop, and released a statement, quote, "It is with deep regret that this congressional office and the people of CD22 will not have Joyce Kaufman as my chief of staff." To which I say, booyah. Why the change? Was it the fact that she had been quoted about illegal immigrants saying this, quote, "If you commit a crime while you're here, we should hang you and send your body back to where you came from, and your family should pay for it." One can only hope that that's why she was relieved of duty. Ironically, she's the one being sent back home now. All right, now one of the central questions facing the White House and Democrats in Congress is whether they concede some issues to the Republicans or stick to their guns. NBC News Washington Bureau Chief Mark Whitaker joins us now to talk about which direction that they're leaning. Mark, we discussed earlier in the program which direction they should lean, but which direction are they leaning? Are they in a fighting mood or in a conceding mood?
Well, Cenk, we won't really know until the president gets back from Asia from this trip he's on. But the fact is, right now, it looks like he probably doesn't have the support that he's going to need to not eventually have to compromise on this issue, this immediate issue of the tax cuts, and probably there will be an extension for everybody, at least for a couple of years. But the real question is whether the president simply concedes on that going into the negotiation, or whether he bargains and what kind of concessions he can get from the Republicans if he does compromise, at least for a couple of years.
Well, you mentioned support. That's a really good and interesting point. Let's talk that through a little bit. How does this work? Because we've had a lot of congressmen and representatives on the show, over this week, saying, no, we want to fight and we don't want to give in on the tax cuts. Grijalva, Weiner, and the list goes on and on. So obviously the progressives want them to fight, but how about the Senate, and how does that play into the president's decision making?
Well, look, they're doing what people do here in Washington, which is they stake out a position. They know at the end of the day they may have to compromise. Remember, these are some of the same people who were holding out to the last minute for the public option in the health care bill, but then when ultimately they couldn't get it, they went along and still voted for the final plan anyway. So that's just negotiation. The real question is, how is the president going to negotiate? Is the president come back and try to stake out a middle ground before when the progressives on the one hand, but also Republicans are staking out the more sort of hardline positions, knowing that eventually they may have to compromise. One of the things to keep in mind here, Cenk, is that a couple of the newly elected Democratic senators who will be coming immediately during the lame duck session from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, and from Connecticut, Chris Coons, have already come out saying that they're in favor of extending the tax cuts for everybody. So that complicates the president's arithmetic even within his own party.
Yeah, Mark, I get the sense that the House does have significant progressives. Half the blue dogs got wiped out, so they might really be in a fighting mood. But when you go over to the Senate side, I think the president might be right that the senators are not in the mood to fight the Republicans at this point, the Democrats at least. And so do you get the sense that on Capitol Hill the senators are saying, it's okay, just give them the tax cuts?
Well, I think there's still a lot of different points of view there, but one thing that I think is really interesting is that with this deficit, with the leaders of the Deficit Commission having put forward some of their proposals, whether the president really uses this as an opportunity essentially to leapfrog everybody here and to come out very strongly in terms of what he thinks an ultimate plan would be to solve our long-term problem, not just to get through this immediate issue of what we're going to do about the Bush tax cuts by the end of the year. And look, that's going to require sacrifice and compromise on everybody's part, but would also allow the president to call the Republicans on their bluff, because the fact is they campaigned as deficit cutters, as people who think that the size of the federal government has gotten too big and our deficits and debt have gotten too big. But the fact is, if you just extend the tax cuts, even some of the spending cuts that they are talking about don't come near to balancing the budget. It just adds to the deficit. And the president could I think, play the grown-up in this situation and basically call both sides on the ways in which fundamentally the math just doesn't add up. And we'll see whether he's prepared to do that.
Well, you know, that's a great point. But I'd love to play President Obama in poker, because my guess is he ain't going to call no bluffs. My guess is he's going to fold.
Look, his approach so far has been on health care, on other issues, to say, look, fight amongst yourselves, work it out, and come to me with your ideas and the plan that you negotiate. I think we're in a phase now after these midterms when he can't afford to do that. I think if he's going to want his point of view to prevail, he's going to have to come out more strongly at the beginning of some of these negotiations, saying what he ultimately wants.
That's exactly right, Mark, and I haven't seen him do that too much over the last 2 years, honestly. I got to ask you a last question about Nancy Pelosi. Yeah. She's saying she's staying. We got 15 House Democrats saying they want her to go. How do you think that plays out? Is it a smart strategic move for Pelosi to say, no, we're going to stand our ground and I'm going to be part of that, or is that going to hurt their cause?
Cenk, first of all, I think you said it right there. There's only 15 people who have been willing to come out publicly and to say that they would oppose her staying on as the minority leader. Look, she's got a couple of things very strongly in her favor. First of all, as you said before, this is a more liberal caucus now after the midterms, and she has their support, certainly on the progressive wing. But also remember, in Washington and politics, money talks. And she has been a prodigious fundraiser for a lot of these House Democrats. She will continue, I think, even in a weakened position, to be a strong fundraiser. They owe her a lot. So I think ultimately she will clearly have the votes. And she wants to stay on, she can.
Another really good point. Thank you so much for joining us. That's, of course, NBC News Washington Bureau Chief Mark Whitaker.